Annyeong! Welcome to Delightful! It's time to get futuristic. I'm teaming up with my fellow doll artists Etelen, Enchantarium, and Dolllinks to bring you the sassiest space-age crew in the galaxy. Each of us designed an essential crew member in our team of aliens, which I'll show you at the end. My crew member? Communications Officer. Let me show you the concept art. I knew right away that I wanted to go the Star Trek route. You know, where they say it's an alien, but it's really just a human with minor cosmetic changes. Seeing as this is the first alien on the channel, I want something classic, a little retro even. And it doesn't get more classic than a little green alien. I believe this Ever After High doll is the perfect candidate. She's got a round head, short torso, and is in desperate need of a glow-up. Ugh. This doll is very dirty. Take her to the med bay! There's a lot of big modifications to get through today, so I'm going to skip the basics. Feel free to pause if you need. Let's begin by chopping up nearly every part of the doll. Applewhite here is pretty tall, but our alien is quite petite. Shortening the legs isn't enough. I want her whole stature to be condensed, which means taking length out of the torso, upper arms, and forearms. The legs? We'll be making new ones from scratch. Now to reconnect the giblets. Simply drill through or into the plastic pieces, and sew everything back together with a jewelry wire. When changing a body shape so dramatically like this, it's useful to keep a couple measurements in mind. Roughly speaking, the elbows should line up with the waist, and the wrists should align with the crotch when the arms are in a resting position. Now for her legs. I took the time to draw up a detailed 2-scale schematic. It may seem like a bother at first, but having the plan in front of you is very helpful for sculpting and keeps you on track with more accuracy. Tongue depressors will form new joints, and I'll use these thick bolts and nuts to make the articulation. To create thicker joints that match my drawing, I simply stack and glue the tongue depressors together, 4 on top, 2 sets of 2 on bottom. If you're not sure what size materials you'll need, I suggest taking your schematic to the store and finding the best fit in person. That's how I found the perfect sized bolts and nuts. Once glued together, I take my largest drill bit and drill holes through the rounded ends. Next, we cut them down to size. Then we use the same techniques to connect our wooden frame to the doll, drilling holes and sewing it together. Connect the parts and see how things line up on top of your drawing. Before anything is too permanent is the perfect time to make changes, trimming off a bit here or twisting the wire there. Let's move on to the first pass of Apoxie Sculpt. I fill in the obvious gaps and provide a strong bond between pieces in this rough and tumble first pass. Now what I usually do when making leg joints like this is to completely cover the exterior nut piece with epoxy, making it stationary, and lay a snake of material around the inner bolt head, making it hidden but accessible for tightening later on. But these bolts don't have screwable heads. I'll come up with something later. Alright, first pass complete! It looks very strange right now, I know. The early stages of doll customizing always do. Time for the second pass, right? No! We're going to do something very odd and sew her clothes on at this stage. Seems out of order, but this was the best solution I could come up with to match my concept art. Her spacesuit must lay underneath her robotic parts, and since I plan on making those robotic parts sculpted on and permanent, well, the clothes must go on first. I rough out a basic 2-piece pattern for the custom body shape. Wrong sides together, sew around the edges, leaving the neck, arm, and leg holes open. Clip the curves and turn it inside out. And slip it over the body. You'll notice that I made it too large on purpose. I had this crazy idea to insert stuffing under the clothes to pad out her body shape. Instead of sculpting larger thighs and arms, the stuffing can do that for me, and even better, look more realistic, thanks to its squishy and bouncy nature. I did try to clump stuffing together in places to slightly control the shape, like on her tummy and her little butt cheeks. Once I'm happy with the stuffing, I zip up the back seam. Lastly, I seal all exits with glue to ensure the stuffing can't escape. And there we go! Pretty cool effect, right? We basically used the plastic body as a posable skeleton and added a fleshy, realistic layer of fat on top, contained by the fabric. Mask the fabric off with a strip of cling wrap to protect it from what's to come, and now we can really dive into the sculpting phase. Lay down a sheet of vinyl over your drawing to make things easier and cleaner, and get mixing. This second pass was pretty tricky. It's not easy sculpting on top of what's essentially a pillow. The epoxy wanted to bounce off and flex outwards, but I did my best. We're not going into detail yet, only blocking out the biggest curves and shapes of each segment. Her hands get some changes too. I'm giving our little green alien only 3 fingers. This seems like a good time to mention that I sculpted an antenna and 2 ears for the head. We'll set these parts aside for now and get back to them later in the video. Epoxy fully cures around 3 to 6 hours depending on the temperature of the room, and once it's hardened, this stuff can be whittled, carved, drilled through, or sanded. I love this stuff. So each pass with epoxy goes through the same steps: sculpt, wait to cure, carve, sand, and fine-tune. Sculpt, wait to cure, carve, sand, fine-tune. Sculpt, wait to cure, carve, wait to cure, fine-tune, wait to sand, wait to cure, sculpt, wait to sand, carve, wait to cure, sculpt, wait to sand, wait to cure. Oh hey, I finally came up with a solution to the bolt head problem. Lay down a temporary paper disc over the opening and screw in the bolt. Then fully encase the bolt head with epoxy, making sure to snug it up nice and close around the bolt head. Basically, we just enlarged the bolt head to make it look like our design. Simple. Basic shapes are now filled in. If you're wondering why there's only 1 video up this month, it's because I had to take care of some more urgent, non-doll related business for a while, so it took me 2 full weeks just to reach this stage. Yikes! But at last, we can sculpt the fun details. Although difficult to see because epoxy is all the same gray color, I roll out snakes of clay and lay them down around the edges, and squish out flat sheets of the stuff to form the multi-layered plates in her design. I fine-tune the edge while it's still wet by cutting it off clean with a razor. Taking each piece one at a time was a wise choice. Although it slows down the process because you gotta wait for each section to cure before starting the next, the last thing you want to do is be working on one leg only to realize you accidentally grabbed and squished the sculpting on the other leg. So take it nice and slow. Particularly with hard surface sculpting like this, that is to say mechanical, inorganic shapes, slow and steady was the only way to approach this. It took a lot more concentration and fine-tuning to achieve a machine-made look. That said, I'm only human and not the most talented sculptor in the world, so she's not completely symmetrical and some parts are a bit wobbly looking. But I'm still pretty proud of this. My sculpting ability definitely leveled up thanks to this project. And now we sand, hopefully for the final time. But wait, you're thinking, isn't she missing some parts? Why yes, how keen of you. I called in for backup, aka Hubby Lightful, and he digitally sculpted and printed out her communicator and her backpack, as well as several components of the helmet, which we'll address now. So, how does one go about making a tiny astronaut helmet? Well, you need something round and clear, which isn't as hard to come by as you might think. Check out this packaging I found in the local recycle bin that once housed a bath bomb. Could work. But I decided to purchase these acrylic hemispheres from a locally manufactured craft supply shop. They came in a range of sizes, but I'll be using the 7cm diameter sphere for our Ever After High doll head. I just wanted to show that specialized materials probably are worth seeking out for a higher quality end product, but finding a free alternative is always possible. Y'all know I live that thrifty lifestyle. We'll need to cut and carve the plexiglass at several key points, first being the neck hole. Use the opening of a spray bottle to trace a perfect circle onto the hemispheres. And now to carve it, somehow. I've never cut plexiglass, so I went at it with a drill to see what would happen. It cracked, that's what happened. That's what I get for diving in head first. Only after this misfortune did I Google how to drill through plexiglass. Well, the internet recommends throwing your drill in reverse and essentially heating up and melting through the plexiglass to create a hole. This worked much better. I figure if heat is the key to cutting plexiglass, that's what I'll use on my sculpting tools. It was a slow go, but I did manage to melt through / carve off tiny chunks of the hemisphere until I widened the hole big enough. Yes, I'm still using the damaged piece. It can be the back of her helmet. Not bad. Now I need to cut 2 holes in the front visor for the antenna to exit through. I lined things up best I could and marked the plastic. Then, using a string attached to our only reliable point of reference on this sphere, the neck hole, I mark and measure the dots to ensure they are precisely level with each other. Center the dot inside the antenna covers and trace. Great, now we can cut these out as well. Say a small prayer asking for the plexiglass to please not crack, and reverse drill those holes. An hour or so of heating up tools and carving later, it's done. Being careful not to scratch the smooth surface, I clean up the edges of the cut with sandpaper. Now to assemble the resin parts. I figure the strongest way to do this would be to drill through the helmet in 3 places and screw them together. I use a heated awl this time to stab tiny holes through the acrylic. But thankfully I could just drill through the resin. Screw them together and that looks so legit! Yes! The resin piece has 2 magnets placed in front on either side, here and here. This is how the visor will set in place without falling off. So that means carving out indentions and placing magnets inside the front section of the helmet to match. To get an accurate placement, I use sticky tack like so, and drill backwards into the acrylic again, but not all the way through, just enough to set the magnets in place with glue and a fabric cover. These 4 magnets at the base of the helmet function pretty well, but for an even better seal I added 2 more tiny magnets on top. I tried to plan ahead to make the most efficient design, but this was more of a try it and see what sticks approach. Thankfully, through trial and error, we still ended up with a functioning removable helmet. With all the many pieces of this doll fully formed and sculpted, we can finally head outside to the spray booth station. Hubby here is going to use his magic touch with the airbrush to coat each piece with primer first, and then several coats of white. If you're curious about what paints or any material we've used in this video, check the description box below for a comprehensive list. They look good, don't they? I've been staring at that icky green-gray epoxy color for so long, seeing the doll in white is like a breath of fresh air. The next step is adding color. I'll be using my good old acrylic paints and tracing paper palette. Just as with the sculpting stage, it took extra concentration to paint as robotically as I could, keeping edges crisp and clean and manufactured looking. Some people might wonder why we didn't mask off sections of the doll and airbrush everything instead of hand painting it. Well, to be honest, it's because I really hate masking. I think it wastes a lot of tape, and I hate generating trash when I craft. This doll has already produced more waste than my usual projects, so I figure I'll just paint really carefully. Thanks to the primer and the white base, the color took very fast. I only needed 2 thin coats per color. Her hot pink chest plate and helmet get a coating of fluorescent magenta paint. Ooh, it's so bright and punchy. I love it. There's probably a real reason astronaut gear tends to be boring and white, but if I were an astronaut, I'd be like, does it come in hot pink though? And let's not forget her skin. Bright Martian green, please. Oh no, the first watery layer on the face just makes her look sick, doesn't it? Everything's painted! Yay! So we head to the spray booth once again to coat everything in 2 or 3 layers of varnish to protect the bright colors and keep the acrylic paint from chipping off. But what about the visor? It's tinted dark purple in my concept art, so how are we going to achieve that? Well, I found a great tutorial by Tresha J.A. where she uses food coloring and Mod Podge to tint plastic. They don't sell Mod Podge here in Korea, so I made do with some kind of PVA glue instead. Will this work? Only one way to find out. I mix up my glue, water, and purple food coloring in a cup, then pour the mixture into the hemisphere. I wiggle it around until all the sides are coated and set it aside to dry. I check back in 30 minutes later to find gaps forming in the glue and what's that? A cat hair? I won't stand for this. For better or for worse, I removed both the cat hair and took a damp paintbrush and tried to fill in the patches. I hope I don't regret this. After setting it up on a much more ventilated platform, it dried quicker, and here's the result. Not awful. I think I could have used more food coloring. The effect is very subtle. Unfortunately, there's a defect right in front here, and the distribution of color isn't completely even. It actually looks pretty cute looking at the footage now, but I end up changing my mind later and completely washing out the tinting. Let's give her her face next. After a spray of Mr. Super Clear Sealant, I brush on dark green pastel pigments around the eyes and nose. Then I come in with a green watercolor pencil to sketch the eyes. Just like my drawing, I want her to have large, almost spooky looking, wide alien eyes, so I'm overdrawing past the facial mold's eye indentions. I rough out the pupils and eyebrows and give her layer number 2 of sealant. Because I'm happy with the base drawing, I dive right in with the darker colors and start building up contrast. It's a relatively simple face this time, big, solid, cartoony shapes without much detail. What do you guys think about the blue-colored eye whites? I think it's just weird enough to come across as alien, but not too freaky looking. Time for layer number 3. To achieve opaque colors faster, I switch over to gouache paints to move things along. And then I switch materials once again and use that neon magenta acrylic paint color to get that fluorescent pop of pink to match her outfit. I love how insanely bright this face-up is. She looks like something you'd see at a laser tag event. For finishing touches, I add 2 sparkly eye shines, which helps her look a little less insane, and use white gouache for subtle highlights. Final coat of sealant, and then add high gloss varnish to her shiny lips and eyes. I heat up the base of her head with a hairdryer to make sure the vinyl is soft and squishy before squeezing it back on over the neck. This part is always scary if you've completed the face up because squishing the head too much will crack the sealant, so be gentle and squeeze the temples as you twist. Now for hair. Using Mozekito's yarn hair technique, I prepare the wefts. She's got 3 buns and bangs, so we need to glue the hair on in the right order and the right direction to achieve this style. I start off with the bangs, right in front. And now it's daytime. Well done with the continuity there, Catherine. I then circle around the pink area, gluing wefts on facing the seemingly wrong direction, out of the pink. Geez, this shot is a disaster. Sorry guys, I'm still getting accustomed to the new studio. Using an iron to heat up silverware, I grab, fold over, and press each weft back in the right direction. As you can see, this gives us a beautiful clean edge, and I must admit, I kinda like the hair just like this. I repeat these steps for each color. Now, the original plan was to flatten the hair like this and create separate detachable magnet buns. You may have noticed I sunk 3 magnets into her head before this. The reason for this was because I thought the space buns wouldn't fit inside her helmet, so the plan was I could ditch them when she's suited up and put them back on when her helmet's off. Well, turns out there's plenty of room in her helmet, buns and all. So I simply tied the hair into ponytails and gave her the space buns like normal. Bit of a wasted effort there. What about the antenna and ears though? Well, I was feeling ambitious and had my heart set on making these parts flexible and squishy. Big thank you to my SFX makeup artist friend Matt for the advice on silicone mold casting. I couldn't have done this without him. So, those clay pieces I made ages ago, they'll be used to make the negatives. We position them hanging upside down, suspended above 2 containers. Following the directions on the silicone containers, hubby pours and mixes part A and B. Then we fill them up. Oh, it's globbing all over the place. Ooh. Once cured, I tear away the container, and there are a couple red flags already. For some reason, the silicone is soft and squishy in some areas but firm in others. Perhaps we didn't mix it thoroughly enough. I cut the mold open down the length of the antenna and remove the clay positive. I separate the ears and simply cut and remove them from the top since they're a shorter shape. This step's important, the barrier coat, also known as mold release. Without this, your silicone cast will be irremovable from the mold, so spray thoroughly. Using the same silicone, we mix in color this time, then pour it in. Do you think it's going all the way in?
I'm not sure. Come on, Slurm.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Ooh. So, how'd they do? Well, digging them out of the mold was not easy. We are amateurs at this, so it's foolish to expect perfect results, I guess. I had to destroy the mold and snip away silicone, but in the end, decent, I'd say. With a little cleaning up, I think they're usable. I'll have to recast and re-pour one more antenna though. And what do you know, try number 2 was a big improvement. There's no teacher like experience. The silicone wasn't the same green as the acrylic paint I used for her face, so I decided to try a gradient fill with acrylics to smooth the transition. Let me tell you, silicone does not like being painted on. And unfortunately, the paint highlighted the many flaws and defects of the cast. Oops. Nonetheless, with a touch of glue and a couple more pins, I secure the ears and antennas to the head. And how cute is that? They're so bouncy and springy and exactly how I envisioned them. I'm so happy. Being flexible like this will also help her put on the helmet, of course. If you look up real close, it is kind of icky, so, you know, just back up a bit and look at her from afar, yeah? And now for the part you've been waiting for, assembling all the components. Because I enjoy biting off more than I can chew, apparently, I also sculpted and cast custom-sized resin gems for the outfit. Let's fit her helmet on. Heck yes, that looks great! More finishing touches. And by Jove, the doll is finished at last! Time for the photo shoot! I repaired and repainted the broken pieces and constructed an entirely new helmet visor from another 7cm hemisphere, which we had to order again. And I made her this customized stand, shortened to fit her stature and weighed down at the base. Also, at the last minute, Enchantarium designed us this adorable team emblem, which each of our crew members wears with pride. And now she's done. Again. For the second time. Say hello to Communications Officer BiBi Bubbles. BiBi works aboard Starship DEDE, which, as you may be able to deduct, are the initials of all the YouTube channels involved in this collaboration. But I imagine DEDE can stand for something else as well. How about Deep Space Extraterrestrial Doll Exploration? Some of you may be wondering why we didn't 3D print more pieces of this doll. They would have certainly been more accurate, symmetrical, and lightweight. It's probably because I'm so stubborn. I want to prove that I can do it myself, old school style, with just clay in my 2 hands, dang it. But yeah, she likely would look a lot more professional with all 3D printed parts. There's no denying it. As for the magnets inside her head that ended up serving no purpose, I figure that can be part of her mythos instead. You know, like maybe her species evolved magnetic skulls for some reason. There are 3 other crew members aboard the DEDE alien ship: the medical officer, the engineer, and the botanist. Each created by one of my incredibly talented friends. Beam over to their channels next to catch their videos. As always, there's a playlist you can click at the end, and you'll find them in the description box as well. What does the future hold for our eclectic squad of space explorers? Only they know for sure. But one thing's certain. Galactic adventure awaits! Warp speed ahead! Thank you so much for watching. Stay artsy. Annyeong!